starting to feel like
Okay, good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to the third regular meeting of the Walnut Creek Planning Commission for Thursday, September 24th. This meeting is by teleconference only. Go ahead and ask the Commission Secretary to call roll.
Thank you, Chair Lezak. Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Pickett.
Here.
Reiser.
Here.
Commissioner Strongman.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Vice Chair Kerselik.
Here.
Chair Lezak.
Here.
All 7 are present. We make it.
As stated earlier, this meeting is by teleconference only. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order, which suspends certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act. Teleconference locations are not open to the public. To provide a live remote public comment, please join the Zoom teleconference meeting. The meeting ID and password are, meeting ID is 940-3325-9067. And the login password is 818517. When the chair opens the public comment period, please use the raise hand feature. We'll alert the staff and commissioners that you have a public comment you'd like to provide. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name for the record. You'd have 3 minutes to make your remarks. Okay, so we would like to begin with the agenda for tonight's meeting. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Commission Secretary, are there any consent calendar items?
There are no consent calendar items this evening.
Okay, thank you. So with having no consent calendar items, we'll move on to the public communications portion of the agenda. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items that are not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posted, request clarification, or for items to staff. At this point, we'll ask if does anyone in the member of the public wish to provide public comment at this time. If so, please use the raise hand feature. If you'd like to provide public comment, ask the Commission Secretary if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comment.
Looking over the list of attendees, for those wishing to provide comment on something that is not an item not on the agenda, hands raised, and therefore we have no public comment for this portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Commission Secretary. So we'll go ahead and close the public communications section, and we'll move on to the next section of the agenda, which is the public hearings section. Tonight's public hearing is the public hearing A project that was the Trinity Center Winter Evening Shelter Conditional Use Permit application Y20058. Address is 1800 Carmel Drive. And with that, we will start by asking if any of the commission members had any ex parte communications regarding this item that they would like to speak to at this point. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and turn over to staff for the staff presentation.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Cara Batista Rao. I'm the Housing Analyst and Sustainability Coordinator in the Community and Economic Development Department. And I'll be presenting tonight on the Conditional Use Permit request for the evening program at the Armory, also called the Evening Winter Shelter. So the operator for this program would be the Trinity Center, which is a nonprofit homeless services provider located in Walnut Creek. And they're looking to operate this evening program sometime between the months of November 15th and April 15th. This would be the 5th year consecutively at the Armory to hold this program, and the 6th consecutive year this program has operated in Walnut Creek. And in June, the City Council approved $100,000 through a state grant for a portion of this budget for the project. In July, the City Council authorized the staff to enter into a license agreement with the State Military Department in order to use the National Guard Armory in Walnut Creek and also approve staff entering into a new 3-year management agreement with the Trinity Center for them to operate the program. You can see here an aerial view of the Armory on Carmel Drive. It's a large gymnasium style building surrounded by a parking lot. On the left side, which is the west, you can see Civic Park. On the right, you can see the Iron Horse Trail. And to the south, there's an apartment complex. There is some military equipment and vehicles that are on site. And here's a view from the front of the building. This is taken just inside the gate at the entrance to the south, and there's a perimeter fence all around the building. The Trinity Center's proposal to operate this evening program is very similar to previous years. Again, they're looking to operate it in the winter months, and this is an overnight program where homeless individuals would be able to sleep at the Armory, arriving there at 7 p.m. and then leaving at 7 a.m. There'd be a maximum of 50 participants. Everyone who participates must be a pre-registered member with the Trinity Center, and so there's no walk-ups to the Armory allowed. All the intake will occur at the Trinity Center, so participants are transported to and from the Trinity Center. There's no alcohol or drugs, no in and out privileges, and there is on-site security. So the military have staff on site, the Trinity Center hires a security guard, and the police department, per the license agreement, must do a daily check at the facility. I want to highlight just a few changes from 2019. And really the big thing driving this, of course, is the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the new sections of the management agreement with the Trinity Center is that they must comply with all state and county public health requirements and guidance on COVID-19. And these requirements and guidance will be incorporated into their operating plan. It may mean that they make some operating changes from their proposal. So for example, with social distancing requirements, they may need to really limit and have much fewer than 50 participants this year. There's also a provision for the city manager to approve an alternative transportation proposal if COVID-19 makes the current proposal infeasible. There are some other minor changes I'll just mention briefly. This year, we wanted to ensure, again, that the public has a forum to give any feedback or concerns about the operation of the shelter. So any members of the public can attend the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force, which meets monthly, usually on the first Wednesday of the month. Again, the Trinity Center has everyone be a member before participating in the program. This year, you can be a member for 15 days rather than a full 30 to participate. And because the Trinity Center is now located back at St. Paul's Commons, the intake will occur at 1888 Trinity Avenue. So regarding the conditional use permit, the Housing Accountability Act really limits the city's ability to deny emergency shelters. To make a denial, we would need to have one of the 5 findings that you see before you. Findings 1 through 4 do not apply. So the city has not met or exceeded the need for a shelter. There's no state or federal law that requires us to deny the shelter. The shelter is not zoned on agricultural property, and it is not inconsistent with local zoning or the general plan. For finding 5, there are several ways to help mitigate any adverse impact upon public health or safety. So as I mentioned earlier, the management agreement will require the Trinity Center to comply with all state and county requirements and guidance on COVID-19, and that's also a condition of approval for the use permit. Regarding safety, to help mitigate the impact on the neighborhood and the park, all of the intake occurs at the Trinity Center. And as mentioned earlier, there is on-site security. So there's a security guard. There is the daily visits by the police department per the license agreement, and there's on-site military staff. In addition, the Trinity Center has on-site program supervisors. So therefore, Staff does not believe that we can make any of the findings that are required to deny the conditional use permit. And staff is requesting that the commission adopt the proposed resolution as condition to approve a conditional use permit to allow the Trinity Center Homeless Shelter to operate temporarily at the Walnut Creek National Guard Armory during the upcoming winter season between November 15th, 2020 and April 15th, 2021. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. We also have tonight the applicant, Leslie Gleason and Pam McGrath are here from the Trinity Center, and they have a short presentation on the results and success from last year's program.
Okay, thank you very much. So before we move to the applicant's presentation, do any of the planning commissioners have questions of staff?
Give it a shot.
Commissioner Strongman.
First question, what would happen if the guard was activated during this time period? Normally it's not activated, but we've had a couple activations this year.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's something we'd have to check with the state military. In past years when they've used the site for training drills, the Trinity Center has had to relocate elsewhere. And so they do have kind of backup sites. Usually those are planned dates where they know ahead of time they can use them. We have not had a case, where it's like a sudden activation. So that's something we'll have to check with the state on.
Okay. Next question, what happens if we have some exceptional weather outside of the time period? Like April 16th, we finally have a snowstorm in Walnut Creek. Fairly unlikely to happen, but it theoretically could happen. What would happen then?
In the state code, they only allow cities to request use of the Armory from October 15th to April 15th. So I think that's a hard deadline. But within those dates, the Trinity Center can shift, between the proposed November and April dates if they need to.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other commissioner questions of staff? We see Commissioner Pickett next.
Yeah, just one quick question. The time frame for a person to be a member before they can participate was reduced from 30 days to 15 days. What was the rationale behind that?
Based on the Trinity Center experience running this program for the last several years, they felt like a 2-week, give or take, window is enough to get to know someone and know if they'd be successful in the program. And we also ran that by the police department before kind of giving an okay to the Trinity Center to make that change.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we'll go next to Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the COVID plan. The state and county orders require very specific written workplace specific plans and other plans that can't just be thrown together or added in 1 or 2 lines or a footnote of an existing plan to run an operation of this type. And I'm wondering if we are missing an attachment or some documents, or if we're just going to take it on faith that a really complex plan is going to be put together in just a matter of weeks to run this facility.
Yeah, so one issue is that we expect that these guidelines and requirements may change over time, as we're seeing with the business community. So that's just a reality. Some of the initial guidelines we've gotten from the county is that for an indoor congregate shelter, that all the participants must have a camping tent that they sleep in. So there is some of that coming out already, and we are awaiting further instruction. But I'll also just see if the housing program manager, Margot Ernst, wants to chime in on that at this point.
Hi, I'm Margot Ernst, the housing manager for the city of Walnut Creek. I don't have a whole lot to add to what Kara's saying. I do know the county does have some guidelines and protocols for congregate shelter. Trinity Center is, as a member of the continuum of care, they're sort of signed on to follow the county's guidelines for congregate shelter that are coming out of the homeless program. And then additionally, the state military will also have some guidelines that will be attached to the license agreement when we do get it. But we have to do our process a little earlier than they do their process. They're not as accustomed to working with cities where a use permit is required. So we haven't gotten the draft contract from them or the guidelines. And that's just like a kind of a consequence of our timing and how we need to do it with the use permit and leaving enough time for appeals and things like that. So we definitely would be adhering with both state and county guidelines on the shelter. And it wouldn't be just a few sentences. It would be a pretty significant packet that would be attached to the contract for the license.
I mean, I would certainly hope so. You know, the checklists and guidelines from the state are many pages long. You know, the orders are in the dozens of pages, and I know they're changing on a regular basis, but that's all the more reason to get started early so that you can adjust to those changes. You can't pull these things together at the last minute. And, you know, we have no way of evaluating whether there's any realistic, you know, whether this is being taken seriously. I mean, I assume it is. I'm told that the Trinity Center has a workplace plan for employees, and that it has a plan for people who use the services, but we weren't given any of that information. So it's a little bit frustrating because we want to be supportive, but it's not clear to us that, or it's not clear to me that there's a full understanding of what's going on here. And we have a high risk population that's going to be using the center. And we want to make sure that employees and people using it and the community at large is all protected from a very serious pandemic that's caught, you know, 200,000 people are dead. We have to take this seriously. So I look forward to the applicant, you know, maybe beefing this up a little bit just so we can all feel very comfortable in approving this.
Yeah, this is Margot Ernst again, and you know, the applicant actually may have some additional information to provide tonight on that. But I will say certainly a condition for this is that it is in full compliance with state and county regulations related to COVID. There's really no flexibility on that. So that would be something that would be very explicit.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Anderson. You need to unmute.
In the CC and CR zoning districts where emergency shelters are allowed by right, they include a distance requirement of 500 feet and 600 feet respectively from residential areas. I didn't see any similar thing for the zoning that we've got here. And I was wondering if that was just the proximity to residential areas would be something that would just be considered in the CUP application.
I'm actually going to ask our planning manager, Ethan, or our senior planner, Greg, to chime in on that question.
We do have Greg Kapovich here. He's worked on this previously. Greg, if you want to jump on, I'm happy to answer otherwise.
Yes, Greg Kapovich for the record, senior planner with the City of Walnut Creek. Have done this program for several years, and essentially the main difference is those are permissible by right so long as they're 500 and 600 feet away from single family residential. In this particular zoning district, it's just a conditional use permit no matter what. There's no threshold, it's just a use permit.
Okay, thank you. The second question I had was regarding alternate locations if the Armory is not available. Have those locations, have they gone through some kind of permitting or evaluation process? Or are they simply available buildings for a short term?
If they're in the city, we may look at them, but traditionally the Trinity Center has used locations that are outside of the city, and so we've not reviewed them. I would perhaps ask the applicants to answer that question at the end of their presentation, as I know they are looking at alternative sites.
Thank you.
This is Margot Ernst, the Housing Division Manager. I'll just chime in that there are some locations that in the city that they may consider that wouldn't require a use permit, where it is allowed by right, in which case we'd be looking to kind of ensure that building and fire code is satisfied, but it wouldn't necessarily be a, you know, a use permit that would be required.
Thank you. I had one last question, which was there's a requirement that if there's any battery assault, physical attack, some kind of violent behavior, the city is required to shut the facility down. And I wonder, perhaps a little bit more detail there. Does that mean it's shut down for the year? Does that mean, you know, CUP is rescinded? Is there a process by which they can, you know, cure the situation and take steps? Is there a process for reopening once something like that has happened?
So in the management agreement, it depends on the level of the offense or physical violence. So at a felony level, we have it so that the city can shut the program down immediately. And in that case, the program is over. If it's an incident that is at less than a felony level, we have some discretion. We may work with the Trinity Center to try to let them cure it, or if we feel that the situation is dangerous, we still have discretion to end the program immediately. So it depends on the level and type of incident.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other, Commissioner Reiser?
Thank you, and thanks, Kara, for the presentation. I just have just a couple questions. First of all, I share Commissioner Ward's concern about the COVID-19. That's the only difference between last year and this year, from my perspective. And you had a slide or two that outlined the differences between the two. You said things like social distancing has to be adhered to, and as was pointed out by Margot, that those are in place by the county and strictly adhered to. Then you mentioned something about transportation. The city manager has the ability or where the authority to change the transportation method at will. If maybe we can touch on that really quick in terms of what that actually means. And then perhaps this is for the Trinity Center folks when they come on, what are the testing protocols that are in place? Are folks that are in the overnight shelter tested daily, a couple times, at least once before they go in? What's the current actual testing protocol for both the staff and the resident, the tentative or temporary residents? Then I have one more question after that, sorry.
So regarding transportation, one of the concerns highlighted by the Trinity Center is that they, want to operate the program safely for their staff and the community and the participants. So depending on kind of social distancing guidelines and the size of the vehicle, it may be very difficult to have social distancing between the driver and the passengers to be able to get people to and from the Trinity Center. So they are looking into some alternatives. And the original reason that transportation requirement is in there is, again, to limit loitering around the Armory site and to have people do the intake at the Trinity Center and then return to the Trinity Center in the morning. So just given how many unknowns there are about COVID and what the requirements might be from the state and from the county, this is just to provide some flexibility. And if the Trinity Center has an alternative proposal that they want to propose to the city manager that helps to, again, limit loitering at the site, but also meets COVID-19 requirements, that's something that we can consider. At this point, it kind of depends on the size of the vehicle and what the requirements are going to be.
Okay, thank you for that. And then it was also mentioned that City Council approved a 3-year agreement between the city and Trinity Center. Just really quick, a clarification on that. Is that the ability for the city and Trinity Center to do it, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the Armory is going to be available, et cetera? We'll still go through the conditional use permit process. We'll still approach the Armory, the state, et cetera, in terms of getting the ability to do that. That's just between the city and Trinity Center, an operating agreement, if you will.
That's correct. Yes, the management agreement is for 3 years just between the city and the Trinity Center. The state will only do 1-year agreements with the city, and so we would do the conditional use permit process on an annual basis and do the license agreement annually.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other commissioner questions of staff? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public comment with the presentation from the applicant. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes. Commission Secretary, you want to promote them to presentation?
I believe the applicant is present and would invite Executive Director Leslie Gleason to the mic. There she is. And I believe Pamela McGrath as well. There we are. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. We are very grateful to be in front of you today as you consider our application. We thank you for your time and expertise as you do so. I can tell by your questions that you've given it a thorough read and are asking the same questions that we've asked as well. These are all the things that we have been wondering since early summer. And as we've gotten continual guidance, we've continued to update and adapt our plans. But first, we want to talk about one of the reasons that we want to do the program, which is success in not only keeping people safe and sheltered over the winter, but the outcomes and the ways that we are able to help people catapult into housing and a more stable future. Pam, if you'll pull up if you can share the PowerPoint and take it away.
Everybody, is that looking good to everybody?
Thank you.
Beginning.
And while Pam is doing that, let me introduce myself as Leslie Gleason. I came in and began serving as the executive director with Trinity Center in early January, and it's been quite a ride since then. So it's a pleasure to be bringing our program to you for the first time on my part, but Pam's an old hand at this.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Pam McGrath. I'm Administrative Services Manager at Trinity Center, and I'm so pleased to be with you tonight to present this presentation on evening program outcomes. Last year's Trinity Center evening program, which operated from December 9th, 2019 through March 27, 2020, was very memorable in many ways. We were introduced to COVID-19 near the end of the program. That was extremely challenging, but we rose to the challenge. And we also had a very successful and rewarding season in many ways. We're pleased to share with you some highlights and some positive outcomes. Trinity Center's mission is to be the doorway to opportunity for homeless and poor. We offer care and hope to each person we serve through supported access to services and resources, and we invite everyone to participate in this mission. At Trinity Center, we are guided by these core values. We speak these words. We live these words. We impart these values as we interact with our members, with one another as staff, and with our community. I invite you to look at these words with me. These words should paint a picture for you. A picture of dignity, encouragement, accountability, community, humility, and service to others. The Trinity Center evening program operates 7 nights a week. We begin each evening at 5:30 with member check-in, at which time a security check is performed and members' prescription medication is checked in for transport to the Armory. The evening meal is served at 6 p.m. at Trinity Center. Volunteers have prepared the meal and they typically dine with staff and members. At 6:30, there's a collaborative effort to clean up and members get prepared to be transported to the Armory in Trinity Center vehicles. 7 p.m. is arrival time at the Armory, where once again, there's a collaborative effort to set up the sleeping area. Members get settled in and it's lights out at 10 p.m. In the morning, lights come on at 6 a.m. Everybody helps get the bedding put away. The Armory is cleaned and members are transported back to Trinity Center, where Monday through Friday, they can get breakfast and lunch and partake of our daily services such as showers, laundry, and case management. Evening program is not just a shelter. We've made sure it aligns with our mission, and in some cases, it informs our mission. Evening program, as an extension of our day program, allows us to offer true wraparound services. The National Guard Armory allows overnight space for 38 program beds and 12 emergency beds. Prior to entry into this program, each Trinity Center member has signed an agreement to participate in the program. Part of that agreement includes working on their personal goals and a personal action plan with Trinity Center member advocates. Other strengths of this program include the power of connection. Our evening program members become a community, and they understand a little bit more about building community because of their participation in this program. This program is a vehicle for building trust and rapport, including with CORE, the Walnut Creek Police Department, and other resource agencies that are connected with us throughout the season. "49 Trinity Center members were served in the 2019-2020 Trinity Center evening program, and all were engaged in case management with our member advocates over the 108 days and nights of the shelter season. Trinity Center member advocates were able to assist members as they made progress in these categories. In terms of housing, 57 VI SPDAT assessments were completed, 18 members were housed, 6 members were temporarily housed, 36 housing applications were completed, and 63 shelter referrals were made. In the area of health and benefits, 25 medical appointments were completed, 21 dental appointments were completed, and 27 mental health assessments were completed. In terms of employment, 25 of our members became employed. 14 employment interviews were completed. 39 Social Security cards were obtained. 5 unemployment benefits applications were completed, and 36 California IDs were obtained. In the area of AOD and other addiction and dependency issues, 25 residential treatment referrals were made, 21 detox referrals were made, and 27 one-on-one unique individual counseling sessions were completed. Where did 49 people go after they exited the evening program last year? This graph demonstrates that 13 were housed, 4 entered SUD treatment, 1 was reunified with family, 9 were sheltered in their car, 7 entered our safe parking program. 4 obtained beds in other shelters. 1 was placed in temporary housing. 1 was placed in a skilled nursing facility, and 9 remained outdoors. We love to share stories. Please allow me to tell you a couple of stories. One will be about Gloria and her journey to self-sufficiency. The attribute that we gave Gloria was perseverance. She entered our evening program after leaving another shelter. That shelter had been too long a distance to her employment, which made it difficult for her to get to work. Once she transferred into the evening program, her commute became manageable. In fact, she was able to obtain a second job, which was a huge bonus for her. This enabled her to find her own rental unit, and now she stays in touch with the case managers at Trinity Center to ensure that she is supported as she continues to move forward.
I would love to add a tagline to that. She was just in the center the other day, and during that time, she touched base with a case manager and also picked up her mail related to voting. And we went over what she can expect now in terms of the voting process so that she can be an active participant in our democratic process this fall. Another member who stayed with us over the winter was Romy. For her, she had an emotional support dog. And I should point out, she had this emotional support dog as well as walked with the assistance of a walker. But she had her little one, Brutus, and he drew a lot of attention from our other members. The sense of isolation that members have and being fragmented from the community just disappears when they're with their animal companions. And the animal companions are like magnets for other members, and in this case, for our volunteers. Our volunteers were a bit concerned about the animal's well-being because he wasn't getting much exercise. So we worked with Romy to really think about that and address that. And we had other members helping out by walking her little one until she was able to feel stable and steady enough to do so herself. So her dog became sort of everybody's dog. And it was a beautiful way for not only her to thrive and see that she could take very good care of her animal companion, but also to feel part of the larger community. She was able to then go into one of the Project Room Key hotel placements where she is still there and still safely in that interim housing and working on searching for permanent housing.
John came to Trinity Center in 2018 after losing the room he was renting due to substance use. He had been a previous member at Trinity Center, so he returned and started participating in the evening program. Member advocates were able to connect with him and assist with a referral to a residential treatment facility. And now John has been sober ever since and is housed in a sober living environment.
And our final story of a life changed is Linda. Linda came to us after having been in another shelter, and she was severely challenged by mental health issues. And again, that isolation. She barely talked with anybody while she was there, but she formed a nice bond with the member advocate, who through time and trust building was able to find out that Linda had bank accounts she wasn't aware of, was eligible for Social Security benefits that she had not been receiving, and perhaps most impactfully, the member advocate was able to reconnect Linda with her daughter. And the sense of relief that her daughter had in knowing that her mother was still alive was unbelievable. In Linda's case, the best housing option for her was to enter a board and care facility. And in the final weeks of our winter season program, she was able to make that transition where she remains safely housed and under the skilled nursing care that she needs, as well as being reconnected with her daughter. I should also mention that for whatever reason, my laptop has gone kind of funny. I can't see you all, but I hope you can see me. Some of the other impacts that we have, that we see, and that are really hard to quantify, but just as important, are the indirect outcomes. We've talked about family reunification, connecting people over time, and as they build up trust and begin to see another pathway for themselves to help them get access to substance use disorder services and referrals. Many people are struggling with legal issues, old warrants that impact and get in the way of their being able to secure employment or further housing. So we help work on that. Some are strengthening their family and community relationships, starting at Trinity Center and being able to reconnect with their family. A big component is mental health, and we're able to work with the county mental health system to help people get assessed and connected with the services they need. And some, yes?
So you're out of time now, so would you mind just speeding it up and wrapping it up? We certainly don't want to cut you off, but we do like to respect everyone's time and ask you to bring it to an appropriate close.
Absolutely, and thank you. Yes, I can't see the clock, so thank you. So in all of these ways and through all of these efforts, the city's support at all levels, including the Planning Commission, has been critical to our success in the evening program. So you share in our recent honor of being named as a 2020 California nonprofit. But more importantly, your support helps us keep people safe and transform lives. We thank you for your consideration tonight. I would like to speak to some of the questions that came up, but I don't know if time will allow that.
So yeah, we'll let you have that be the end of your presentation, and then we'll go ahead and ask commissioners if they would like to ask some questions of you, and then you'll have appropriate time to answer their questions.
Thank you.
So commissioners, we'll start with Commissioner Reiser.
Thanks, Chair Lezak, and thanks for that presentation, Leslie and Pamela. That was fantastic. And I'm just going to go back to my only question that I had from the prior presentation, which has to do with the COVID-19 testing. How does that work both with staff and in this case with the temporary residents?
Yep, that's an excellent question. We are testing as needed. So if someone feels they may have been exposed, then we are encouraging them to get testing, same for staff and members. The county's hotel program, Project Room Key, had been doing monthly what they called surveillance testing of everybody in the hotels. And we were once able to get healthcare for the homeless people to come test everybody at our site who wanted to receive the COVID testing, but they have staffing limitations. And because of that, in addition to their resources going to the hotels, we have not been able to get on-site testing, nor would we really be able to ensure that if we did require weekly testing, that could happen. And in fact, even at the hotels, the latest decision is that monthly surveillance testing isn't needed there. So we don't have weekly required testing. It may or may not be feasible, but we do have a very strong protocol about what happens if there is a known case that comes on site, and that protocol would be followed to a T at the evening program. Even unfortunately, if that meant having to shut it down, because none of us can take the chance of transmitting COVID-19.
Great, thank you so much. Would you mind just touching on that really quick? What is the protocol? Should someone come in with symptoms or having had tested positive?
Yep, they're immediately isolated. Well, first of all, we ask everybody coming in to self-assess all the standard symptomatic things. We also do still ask people to cooperate with a temperature testing. But if someone relates that they have symptoms or they're testing high temperature-wise, we immediately isolate them. We mask them up, we mask us up. We ask them more questions about if they've been exposed, how long ago that might have been, what the symptoms are. Meanwhile, we're also calling the county health nurse emergency line. It's a special line that we have access to, and other homeless providers do as well. And then that staffer, that healthcare professional on the other end, will talk through the cell phone to the person in question and determine what needs to happen next. Is it a test? Do they need to be taken to the persons under investigation hotel through the county as they're tested and while they're being quarantined? So at that point, we let the county health system take it over from there. But basically, we make sure there's no further exposure. And then we also ask the staff person to consider if they might want to get a test. It has only happened once. All of the members that we have had this interaction with, they've all been tested and none tested positive. And in fact, within the homeless community, there's been a remarkably low incidence of positive tests and people who have actually gotten sick, because we've all been working together since day one to make sure it doesn't happen.
Great. That's great. Thank you, Leslie.
Yep.
Okay, other commissioner questions of the applicant, Mr. Commissioner Anderson? Commissioner Anderson, you're on there again.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. First, let me thank you folks for the work that you do. It really does help to fill a hole in the social safety net that if you weren't doing it, who knows what would happen to do that. So thank you for that. I just want to touch on one thing. I noticed there was a protocol for preventing and discovering and responding to fire. That should be an issue because the building isn't sprinkled. I was a little surprised to hear that, given its use as an armory and now as to house a large number of people. And I wonder if if the building owner has considered sprinkling the building. The type of building is a large open space. It's fairly straightforward, not necessarily cheap, but definitely straightforward to add sprinklers. Do you know if that's something that they have been considering or that they would consider, given the great lengths you're going to kind of compensate for that?
I would have to say I was surprised by that as well. And I will probably need to turn to the experts, either Pam or city staff, to speak to that, what's been done over the past few years.
I would just say that the license agreement provides the facility as is, and it's the National Guard, it's the state military that has that facility. So the workaround has been, an on-site inspection with the fire marshal and the city chief building official. We do a walkthrough and with Trinity Center go over all the requirements. So there are temporary smoke monitors and then also a staff person who is continually looking for fire on site. And that's been the case since the beginning of the program and has worked well, but to our knowledge, the state is not interested in making those upgrades.
There is a protocol for staff every 30 minutes. They do a walk around, fire check, use their nose, use their eyes, use all their senses, and then that is logged. And when I was managing the program, I would look at that every morning and make sure that log was completed and signed, and the city gets copies of it as well. It's sent routinely into the city. And I would follow up with staff who missed a 30-minute time period. So we're very strict about that.
I was impressed with the actions you're taking to account for that. But if someone might kind of put a bug in the ear of the owner to think about that, it would save you a lot of trouble. Thanks.
Commissioner Pickett.
Yeah, in regards to compliance with county and state regulations and how that might apply to this particular use, I'd imagine you also need to comply in your other facility. Does anybody monitor that? Does a county or state ever check on you and see that you're complying with that? Or how's your compliance in your permanent facility going to be compared to compliance with the state and county regulations in terms of this temporary facility?
We are absolutely compliant, and we would be even if we weren't required and even if we weren't monitored, because of how important it is to us to keep each other safe, volunteers, staff, and members alike, although we don't currently have volunteers on site. They may be doing monitoring, the county may be doing monitoring. If they're doing secret shoppers, we don't know. We haven't had any concerns raised. And I would say that no county officials have come by and identified themselves as coming to check us out. But it doesn't matter if they do or not, we're gonna still adhere to all the guidelines because we don't wanna take any chances. Right now, we're being asked to have all the members eat and drink outside and limit the number of people in the building to basically the capacity of the restrooms, showers, and laundry. So people are staying out, and we have found ways to make that comfortable with shade tents and lots of water during that period of terrible, terrible weather and smoke. We were fortunate that St. Paul's Church allowed us to use some of the community rooms and the meeting rooms that are adjacent to our space. And so we were able to let people be inside if they wanted to and still stay socially distant. But that was just under those extreme circumstances.
Okay, and I didn't quite understand what you were doing in terms of testing. It sounded like Trinity Center doesn't undertake, or not having any testing done on site, and the best you can do is to refer somebody to go somewhere else to get tested, and that's based on maybe symptoms or whatever they tell you. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes, we did on one particular day, Healthcare for the Homeless sent their team and we tested everybody who wanted to be tested, but due to their staffing constraints, they are not able to send more staff unless we can ensure that 20 or more people will want to do the testing at that point. So they have not been able to come on a regular basis. They're being deployed other places as well.
Right.
So, but we do strongly encourage people and we let people know how they can get tests. And again, that's members and staff.
Okay.
We would we would happily have people tested, but the county hasn't been able to make the personnel available to have that happen.
Okay. Is there any place on Walnut Creek that one of these homeless people can go? Or do they have to go to San Ramon or Dublin or Pleasanton or Martinez?
If they're Kaiser or John Muir members, they can access the testing protocols through those healthcare providers, as I myself have done.
I'm not sure how many homeless people are Kaiser members, but maybe some.
It's definitely a concern that we have as well, which is why when the county came out with their guidance about distancing and doing the best that we can to keep people safe, we are all geared up to do that.
Yeah, and of course, restaurants don't test people when they come in either. So the whole thing there is to keep the distance. So last topic, I may have a couple of questions on it, but is the transportation. So in past, you probably transported the people in like a 12-person van or something like that, or did you get one of those 20-person buses or?
Yes, we have a 10, 12-person van. So you're right. That is how we've done it. And then supplemented with volunteers who would drive people between the two locations and then head home themselves.
Okay, so how do you envision the transportation for this operation in terms of the vehicles you have available to you and in terms of social distancing? I mean, obviously in a van, you might get only 3 people instead of 12. How do you envision handling the transportation?
That is one method. We would be able to use the van, but we'd have to make more trips. We could also make use of rideshare services that do have the appropriate barriers. The taxis are rideshare services that can do that. We're also thinking maybe under these extraordinary circumstances that the county military would allow the handful of members who do have vehicles to drive themselves over and enter as part of sort of the caravan of people arriving at the evening hour. That's what we've come up with so far. We also are being encouraged to talk maybe with bus lines and see if we can get buses available. That of course would require drivers, all of which will add to the cost, which is a consideration. But if that's what's necessary to keep people safe, then that's what we're going to do.
Okay, so the last question, maybe more of a comment. I was going to ask if you had talked to County Connection. It sounds like you have not. So when you get to that point, obviously they're transporting people on their buses. Their buses are still running around town.
Mhm.
So they might be able to give you some insight out of how they manage it, because they got, large capacity buses as well as some of the small, medical transportation buses that they use. So they might be able to give you some insight into how you handle it, and maybe they'd even be able to help. So
Yep,
that's
thank
probably
you.
worth exploring. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great tip and one we are planning to pursue. Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions of the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and step away from the applicant now and open up to public comment from the general public. And at this time, if anyone in the public would be interested in making a comment, please use the raise hand feature, and we will ask the commission secretary if there are any members of the public who would like to make a comment.
It appears that Reverend Fregoso is interested in making a comment. I believe she is present. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you. 3 minutes, we'll begin.
Thank you. I'm the Reverend Krista Fregoso from St. Paul's Walnut Creek, where Trinity Center is. And I'm speaking in support of the Trinity Center and your continued support by approving this permit and for the workers, for the winter shelter program at the Armory. As we continue some form of kind of like shelter in place during this COVID time, I really appreciate your effort in making sure that everyone has a place to go to. As you saw in the presentation, just saying yes to a simple use permit is a way of actually changing lives, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your continued support for Trinity Center. Now, I have one more little comment, which probably may not be in your purview, but I think getting it out there is probably important to know. The Armory cost has increased, and as you heard, you talked about the transportation costs probably increasing the cost for the Trinity Center to be able to actually do this program. And so if there's any way that we can find different ways to support more funding for Trinity Center through grants or other ways to support them in our city, that would be really, I'd really appreciate that. I appreciate that my city of Walnut Creek, when talking about citizens, is looking at every citizen in its community. And so I appreciate your support and your thoughtfulness in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Commission Secretary, are there any other members of the public interested in making comment?
It seems as though, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but Jalila Mahari has been waived in to provide a comment, and we will wait for that individual to appear.
Hello.
Okay, we have a phone, which is great. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hello, my name is Galila, and I'm a nursing student at Cal State East Bay, and I'm also speaking out in support of using the Trinity Center to provide housing to our homeless population. I believe that utilizing the Trinity Center to service the homeless population for the upcoming winter months is of utmost importance, because not only are we still faced with managing and treating the COVID-19 epidemic, but flu season is also soon approaching, and having these two major respiratory conditions coinciding at the same time leaves our most vulnerable population to not only have a poor prognosis, but this also contributes to higher rates of transmissions and hospitalizations, since most encampments for the homeless are often close-packed, congested, and can be rather unsanitary. In addition, our homeless population may have numerous comorbidities like diabetes, COPD, or already have a cardiovascular or pulmonary health condition that could already leave them predisposed to and vulnerable to COVID-19. So for this reason, we need to view housing as a basic human right, and we as a community need to create this housing center to send a message that the health and well-being of the homeless is not to be overlooked or disregarded, but to be valued and respected. So thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We'll go ahead and go back to our commission secretary and ask if there's anyone else who'd like to comment.
I do not see any other members of the public raising a hand wishing to comment, so I believe we have heard all the comments for this evening on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, so with that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment.
Mr. Chair, if I can interrupt briefly before you close public comment, just to clarify for the record, we did not receive any written comments as well during this hearing via the email inbox. So just to clarify that for the record, thank you.
Okay, thank you. But we did receive one letter of correspondence that was submitted as part of the project information that was posted. All right, so thank you for that. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we'll return back to the commission for deliberation, questions of staff, any other comments, and or looking for a motion. Who would like to start? Vice Chair Chriselli, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lezak. The Trinity Center has been operating this for several years now, and I've been watching it the entire time. They've been very successful in the past. I have no doubt they will be just as successful, if not more so, this year. They are very good at responding on the fly to demands from the Armory and the state and everybody else, and I'm sure they will do another good job dancing with this COVID issues and trying to figure out the transportation problems that they have. And I think they'll do another great job for the city. They've shown a lot of success. And with that, I would like to make a motion that we approve the CUP and adopt the resolution with the conditions that we have to date, and wish them success in another year with the winter shelter.
I'll
Second that.
Okay, I think I heard a second from Commissioner Ward before we had all the other seconds. So
we all want a second.
Are there any other commissioner comments before we go ahead and take the vote? Okay, great. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and ask the commission secretary to call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vice Chair Koselik?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward?
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes.
Chair Pickett?
Yes.
Commissioner Reiser?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
And Chair Lezak?
Yes.
The ayes have it, 7-0. Motion carries.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Good luck
Thank
to
you.
you.
Okay, well, so with that being the only item on our public hearings portion of the agenda, we'll close public hearings, and we're going to go ahead and move on with tonight's agenda to commission considerations. I'll ask the commission secretary, are there any commission considerations for this evening? And you're on mute.
Apologies. Not this evening. There are no items for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so having none, we'll go ahead and move on to the final section of the agenda, which is a commission member and staff reports or announcements. Are there any commission member reports? Are there any staff announcements? Anyone? Commissioner Ward?
I just wanted to make a short public service announcement to anybody who might be listening who's not registered to vote, to encourage them to do so. Voter registration is available up until the date of the election, but this year particularly, it's important to vote early if at all possible. And registration online is still available, and everybody's going to be sent ballots in California. So I would encourage people to take advantage of and make sure to vote and to register to do so if they haven't already. Thank you.
Isn't the saying vote early and vote often?
That is the saying, but we're encouraging only voting early. That is officially.
I didn't want to
what we're
finish
doing.
your sentence there, Melissa.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But we're not actually in Chicago, so we're going to just go with voting early
We're
this year.
going to do one per one, huh?
That's right.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Or anyone else? I just have a very quick one, and that was members of City Council and Planning Commission were invited to attend East Bay Mud Director John Coleman's presentation, sort of an update on the state of our water supply system. That was yesterday, Thursday. I attended said Zoom meeting and obtained a copy of the slides, which I thought just in and of themselves were rather informative. And I forward them to the commission secretary to share with those of you who are unable to attend. So just wanted to let you know that would be potentially be coming your way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to forward those along to the rest of the commission.
Okay, anyone else? So seeing none, we'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned at 8:07 p.m.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good evening.
Couple of weeks.
Nice work, guys.